First up, we have open forum. Chris Sanders and the Westford School Committee are leading a series of restorative justice workshops and discussions as we come to terms and learn. This was all precipitated by the racist comments made at a recent basketball game. First, two things you can do. One is you can watch the video of the session that was held last week. And if you Google Westford Restorative Justice, it'll come up. The YouTube link will come up. And then second, on Thursday night at 6, there's a number of small group circle meetings that will be held. And if you'd like to participate in that, we encourage you to do that. Request for change of directors on a Massachusetts general license, all alcohol club license.
So moved.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Consent agenda, request for the rain date for an Earth Day celebration. Applicant is Carol Morse on behalf of Westford Climate Action. And there's also a banner request for Learn to Row. The applicant is Jonathan Rychek on behalf of Westford Community Rowing.
Motion to approve.
Second. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Request from the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee to increase the membership to 12, adding one alternate seat and appointing Nick Schott as an alternate member.
So moved. Second. Aye.
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 I'm also an aye.
Tonight, we have announced the reimbursement received from the Federal Emergency Management Agency for firefighter overtime, for police custodial overtime, for PPE, disinfecting, and other supplies related to COVID. And then request to approve the following purchase orders. All Sports Heroes for 12 bulletproof vests in the amount of $16,545.96. And the following contracts: Geo Sync Tech for professional engineering services for the continuation of Stony Brook Flow Restoration Project in the amount of $44,304. Mayor Services for the installation of test wells at Depot Road well site in the amount of $12,474. And 2 grants, one from the Executive Office of Elder Affairs in support of social services, Cameron Senior Center in the amount of $40,248, and a Department of Fire Services for student awareness in fire education.
I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. Aye.
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 I'm also an aye. Review the draft charge and determine makeup of membership for new monument committee to formalize a process to review monument requests and make recommendations to the select board.
The question and concern that I have about the member makeup is that we have 2 seats that are held for Westford Remembers. And I know Westford Remembers does amazing work in our town, but we don't have, as far as I know, and I kind of checked in with Eric a little bit, that we don't have any other committee that holds formal seats for nonprofits, right? So we have committees that hold seats for our other town committees and other town boards, but we don't do it for WestfordCAT, for example, on the Communication Advisory Committee, or we don't do it for the League of Women Voters on like the Access to Town Meeting Committee. So it feels kind of weird to have these 2 seats just for Westford Remembers.
The current stock that we have is disproportionate, I think, in honor of veterans. And if you look at the past monument committee, when we used to have one, that also had a Veterans Affairs officer on that committee. So I think we took out the VSO necessarily as a town position and replaced it with just a veteran sort of spokesman.
Yeah, I think keeping the members from Westford Remembers is good for the committee because that's the reason we started this thing. I'm comfortable with that.
I would note that, think about the most recent monument, I think it is the Pelori Memorial, which is, not to a veteran, but to a local young child or teenager who had a lot of vision and vibrance. And we remember that in that memorial. Barrie, Vermont lost huge chunk of the population to the Spanish flu. So they just recently commissioned a monument to the losses from Barrie in that event. So it is something I think the towns are thinking about, that we should probably encourage that as part of the criteria.
By stepping outside of sort of soldier-based, war memorial-based stuff, we are kind of in a wide open territory now. And most of the comparable communities that were listed are still focused, at least the language in their charter is still pretty much focused on war memorial stuff. If we would like to ask this committee to come back at some point soon and brief us and sort of give a sense of what their process is and sort of how they're wrapping their heads around this whole issue. I think there's a lot of people worthy of thoughtful remembrance, and I'm just wondering how we make sure we're taking that broad view from the beginning and not sort of taking things as they come, which I think could result with a lot of white men being stacked up here if we don't take a broad view from the beginning.
I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I agree with you, Tom, because I think we should think broader. And I think by thinking what the makeup is, we're setting that direction of how broad that scope could be, right? So again, I do feel uncomfortable with having 2 seats specifically for a nonprofit. Why should they have a seat here when we don't offer that same type of seating to our other nonprofit partners who do a lot for us as well. What about the Cultural Council in town? They've also talked about public sculptures, which I know is different than a memorial or a monument, but I want to be inclusive in terms of how we're viewing this.
Would it be healthy for this committee to have a DEI committee member liaison, just so we're always keeping front and center sort of who are we listening to and who are we recognizing and who are we celebrating? I think we want there to be an understanding that if we're going to be, recognizing people in the public space somewhere in town with a memorial or a remembrance of some kind, that we're trying to build a collection of voices and not just reacting to people who come over the transom.
Anita, while I hear what you're saying, we are still Westford residents. We have done veterans work. David's also been, for the last couple of years, working on a Women of Westford with the Historical Society. He did the Pelori Monument, which is diverse. He's working on a Native American only because people have asked him to work on those. We're not solely veterans. Westford has always been a diverse community. My grandparents were first generation here. My neighbors were Russian, the next ones were Polish, the next one were English, all the way around the block. I think we're saying it to the point where we're making walls instead of taking them down. I think we're being unfair by saying we're not diverse enough or we're not looking diverse enough.
I just wanted to say a couple of things, and I appreciate, Nancy, that you're being very straightforward and honest and that you're having this conversation. I guess two things. One is you're putting words into my mouth. I didn't talk about diversity. That was Tom's comment, as you just mentioned here. I know you're on the DEI committee, and I worry that we're setting a precedent about having a nonprofit hold seats on our town committees. I'm not having an issue with Westford Remembers. I'm not having an issue with the Westford Remembers members who are applying to be on the committee. What I have a concern about is the seat for a nonprofit. We don't do that for the League of Women Voters. We don't do that for WestfordCAT. Why are we doing it for Westford Remembers? Why is this nonprofit being treated differently than our other nonprofits? What precedent are we setting by this committee? I thank you for all of the work that you do in town, but there was not any sort of personal attack to you, and I'm sorry if you took it that way. I'm talking about a nonprofit precedent and policy for our committees.
Right, and Rita raises a fair point. I never really thought about members of nonprofits on boards. I think the danger is, if you think about like WestfordCAT on the Communications Advisory Committee, well, the Communications Advisory Committee is making business arrangements with carriers that would directly affect WestfordCAT. So they can't be on it because of the conflict of interest. In this case, we've got a nonprofit that's got no financial connection to the awards or to the monuments, so I don't see any conflict. I don't think it's a precedent so much as it is recognition of history of that team, and we just treat this as it comes up on a committee by committee basis. Right now, we've got some applications through word of mouth, but there's been no official advertisement of a new committee. So after tonight, there would be a townwide advertisement for community members to join. We may get more, and again, we might change that composition based upon that.
So I will entertain a motion to vote on the first two paragraphs of the charge as written.
So moved.
Again, aye.
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 And I'm also an aye. So is there a motion to take a position on the composition of the committee?
I move that the committee shall be comprised of 7 members, 1 member from the Historical Commission, and 6 community-at-large members.
I'll second that.
Aye.
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 Aye. An update on the J.V. Fletcher Library expansion project.
We became eligible as a town in 2007 to again seek construction grant funding from the Board of Library Commissioners, our state agency. It wasn't until 10 years ago, March of 2012, was the first of 4 town meeting votes to both fund the planning and design grant, which was a stepping stone grant. And then in October of 2016, the town voted to accept the planning and design grant. As of March 2020, we anticipated that the town cost would be about $12.3 million. 1 decade later, we are now number 5 on the wait list. Once we receive a grant notice from the state, we do have 6 months in order to have the 3 critical votes that are necessary. 1 would be a town meeting vote of 2/3 approval. 1 would be your board's vote to put the question on a ballot, and the last would be a majority vote at the ballot box. We are still unsure whether something that has taken us a decade of waiting will now be rushing us this summer, or whether it will be another year. At this point, we are still in a waiting position.
Thank you for this update. It's very helpful. It doesn't seem like there's anything more we can do until we know, because we don't know what we'd be asking the town for until we know. And unless there's any further business, thank you all, and thank you all that have joined us tonight.